Hello and welcome back to the Dugout, all 12 teams, the series where we've been previewing every Scottish Premiership team's season. Today is the Aberdeen episode, and we have the host of Red Tinted Glasses, Glen Schreuder, on to speak about it. Glen, how are you doing, mate?
Yeah, good, Alex. Thank you very much for getting me on the show. And always a pleasure to speak about Aberdeen.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. And it's an exciting season coming up, obviously, off the coming off the back of that massive Scottish Cup victory. Um, it's a huge thing to build on. Definitely, I feel like there's a good feeling around the club this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Leighton Clarkson just did an interview with the club TV channel speaking about the feel-good factor coming off of last season and how important it is to build on it going into this season. You look at season ticket sales being up on last season as well. Obviously, the fact that, European football coming to town, I'm sure will play a part, even though not strictly linked to your season ticket. But it's a real opportunity for the club to capitalize on the success. And I think this season, I know we're going to maybe specifically speak more on the league side of things, is going to be tighter than ever, I think, this year. So, I don't think we can afford to go 2 months without a win again this season.
Yeah. That was definitely a spell last season where it was tough. There was that massive great start, come out the blocks flying, and then I think it was the draw to Hibs, and then the defeat to St Mirren, and then from then on in, it was, I think it was like 13, 14 games. With
14, yeah.
Yeah, 14 games without a win, and I think definitely with the teams around you, it is a must that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, lessons will have been learnt from last season. Obviously, Jimmy Tilleen's first season in Scottish football. I felt at times he was a bit stubborn last season, and I think, we've already maybe made some signings to adapt to his style, but also adapt to have more of a plan B because I think, the games you mentioned, that Hibs game was definitely a turning point for both teams, really. But
Yeah.
St Mirren away kind of stood out to me as the first team to really work us out. And after that, I felt every team worked us out, but Jimmy Tilleen maybe hadn't quite worked out how to counter what teams were doing to us until, well, he saved the best to last. He saved it to the Scottish Cup final and came up with a plan B, and it worked perfectly.
Yeah, it definitely did. So I think we'll start with signings. One that
Hmm.
I've seen that he joined over the past few days, and you've got the receipts from Alfie
Yeah.
Dorrington coming back for another season. You seemed quite chuffed with that one.
Yeah, well, I'm chuffed with that one because he made a comment during the Player of the Year event to me that, if we offered him a contract, he would sign it. And in my merry state, you post that on social media and folk kind of obviously take it with a pinch of spot salt, and especially with a lone player from a Premiership club down south. But I think it's an excellent signing. At centre back, we've been a bit soft at times in some of the goals we've conceded. Christers Tobers, who we signed last January, hasn't kind of been able to prove his fitness yet. Slobodan Rubic's future remains up in the air as well. And I think, Alfie's got a bit of versatility about him along the back line. Um, and I think his ball carrying ability as well out of defence fits in with Jimmy Tilleen's style. So I think it's always great when you can get a lone player coming back that understands the club, has a bit of experience and knows their teammates as well. So I think that's a really, really big move for us.
Yeah, and you mentioned there that the centre back position, it's one for me personally that every time I watch Aberdeen, I feel like there's a different kind of pairing going on
Hmm.
there. It chops and changes quite a lot. Is it one that is it one that you would like to see more settled this season?
I think it has to be. You're absolutely right. To kind of highlight that last season, it did feel like it was chopping and changing too much. Obviously, we had the kind of issue with the goalkeeper injury with Mitov and Duhan chopping and changing as well. So it never really felt that we had a settled spine of the team for large periods. And I think it's vitally important for any team, not just Aberdeen, to have that settled centre back pairing because if you can get the confidence from the back and obviously build on that with clean sheets, it makes winning games a lot easier if you're not conceding goals. So really interested to see on Friday night when we come up against Ipswich if it's back to Dorrington and Knooster in that centre back pairing.
Yeah, definitely. You touched on Slobodan Rubezic there, and I think there's a few others. Polvara, Jensen, I think was another
Yeah,
one. They were playing against Turriff United
yeah.
as Aberdeen were playing in a friendly against Cove Rangers. Are those names you expected to maybe see out the door or out in the cold?
I'd be very surprised if Dante Polvara was out the door or put in the cold. I'm just kind of thinking that his move to, or involvement, I should say, in the Turriff United game was more to show his leadership qualities. He was named as captain for that game. That's the straws that I'll grasp onto for this moment in time. I'd be disappointed if he left. I think the other names that you mentioned there, Richard Jensen and Rubezic, also for me, Peter Ambrose, who was involved in the game against for Martin United this weekend, where the rest of the squad were down against Fulham. I think these are players that will be out the door either come the end of August or sooner.
Yeah, Ambrose is one that never really made an impact. That I saw, he was all. I think I saw him in flashes, and he was all right, but he could never quite break into that team, could he?
Yeah, I think the only thing I remember him doing of significance last season was scoring the late winner at home against Dundee United. Other than that, it was, yeah, I think, there'd always be the debate on the podcast that we could do a better job up top for 5 minutes.
Yeah. Um, speaking on strikers, we'll talk about another new addition. Cassini Yenge is one that
Hmm.
I saw when Aberdeen had signed him. I thought, wow, this is a sort of statement of intent. I've followed him a little bit because bit of a FIFA nerd. A couple of years ago, I did a Portsmouth career mode, so I've followed him, and he seemed like a really good player. And then when I saw that Aberdeen had signed him, I thought, wow, yeah, this looks like a good signing.
I think, it's an interesting signing. Obviously, his brother's at Livingston, and I think people that will have seen his brother at Livingston will have said, yeah, he's a good player. So, for Scottish football, we spoke to a Portsmouth fan for the podcast when he signed, and I think the standout and maybe concern amongst the Aberdeen support is his recent injury record. But Freddie's comments around Cousinho was, if he stays fit, he's got the physical presence to deal with Scottish football, and he can score goals. And seeing him against Cove, he probably should have scored. He was very unselfish in squaring it for Nicholas Milanovic, who then scooped the ball over from 2 yards out. But he has a bit of a gangly appearance, but he's very broad. So I do think he will cope with that physical nature. He scored against Fulham at the weekend, so hopefully that boosts his confidence. And I think it's important for all strikers, and certainly coming up to Scotland, we've sometimes seen strikers from England struggle. Um, if he can hit the ground running, I think our start to the league season isn't the necessarily kindest. Um, right now, certainly the discussion on our podcast is we could do with another striker. And that's not a criticism of Cousinho at all. It's just that unknown quantity around him. Um, but look, strikers can very easily win fans round in an instant.
Yeah. Speaking of trying to bring in more strikers, there were links over the past few days for a return to Ode Daba
Hmm.
from Sporting Charleroi. What are your thoughts on that one?
I said last night on the episode I wouldn't be against the return of Obde. I know Phil that was on the podcast last night is maybe lesser and would rather see Kevin Nisbet return. I think Obde offers you an out and out striker in terms of someone that is going to be a predator in and around the box and look to finish chances. He isn't going to give you maybe the more all round game that Kevin Nisbet does. I think right now where we are with Obde, he's probably not an immediate target, and it's maybe one that we'll revisit later in the window if we're struggling. I think he possibly was a bit unfortunate in the fact that Charleroi extended his contract, took up that clause, which meant that if Aberdeen wanted to pick up the option to purchase him, which we of course carried, it meant we had to pay more money than maybe when the deal was initially agreed. So that could have worked against Obday in that factor, and maybe the club looking to put money elsewhere.
Yeah, and you mentioned sort of his style of play there, and sort of an out and out striker. Is someone like a Kevin Nisbet who would link up the play you think suited better to be leading the line?
Um, I personally, yes, and I think for me as well, again, going back to speaking about player of the year from last year, I think it speaks volumes the fact that Kevin Nisbet walked away with players player of the year. So obviously well respected and well liked within the dressing room. Again, for the countless times I've watched highlights of the Scottish Cup penalties, you just need to watch his reactions to the penalties and how involved and bought into the whole thing Kevin was. So I certainly wouldn't object to seeing him return to the Aberdeen squad in the summer if Millwall let him go.
Yeah, that's always a good indicator, isn't it, of sort of a player's role in the dressing room when their fellow teammates, vote them players player of the year, because it's not always based on their level of play. Obviously, I've never played
Mhm.
at that high a level, but I remember when I voted for my players player of the year, it was someone in the squad that we looked up to.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're absolutely right. That was, I think, there wasn't say maybe a surprise around the room when that was announced, but a pleasant surprise, I think, to say, oh, people maybe suspected a Graham Shinnie or that, but maybe didn't think a lone player would be the one that gets the vote. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that one pans out over the next few weeks.
Yeah. Just a couple more signings. Emmanuel Giamfi, I'm going to go for.
Yeah.
Uh, Go back from Schalke. I'll be honest, I don't know much about him. He's pretty young in his career. He sort of obviously played for Schalke's second team, and then VVV Venlo last season, a full season it looks like. So it seems like you could be getting an unknown quantity there.
Yeah, and still unknown to the Aberdeen support as he picked up an injury over in Portugal on the pre-season training camp, so hasn't actually featured
Is that
in
long
the
term? Do you know?
well, the club have said they hope that he'll be fit for the game against Hearts, but we obviously haven't seen him against Cove. The Fulham game was behind closed doors, so it'll be interesting to see if he does feature at all against Ipswich on Friday night. Otherwise, it'll be very much an unknown quantity, not just for Aberdeen fans, but Hearts fans as well when the game at Tynecastle kicks off, if he's obviously fit for then.
Yeah. Another one that you did mention, unfortunately missing the chance, but Milanovic from Western Sydney Wanderers looks to
Mm.
have a pretty effective goal scoring record. Of that right hand side, I think so.
Mhm.
Um, a goal scoring winger, I always like to see that coming into my club personally. So is that something that you think that the squad needed?
Yeah, I think we needed a threat on both sides and even a consistent threat on that right side to potentially take the pressure off of Shayden Morris. Again, having only seen Milanovic in the 45 minutes he got at Cove, he will definitely cause defenders problems. My only slight fear based on that 45 minutes is his physicality. Again, you see when players come to Scottish football, they maybe get brushed off the ball a bit easier. That in other leagues is given a foul, whereas in Scottish football it's get up and play on. Very left footed, so I think it might be quite easy to suss out what his plan is when he's running at defenders, but it's quite obvious what Shayden Morris is going to do, and he was still extremely effective at that last season. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think, he's a player, as you said, a winger that can cut inside and score goals is always exciting for any club. And the fact we now have that on both wings is as exciting, but also a very much hallmark of how Jimmy Tulline likes to play football.
Yeah. Just quickly before I talk about the other signings, you mentioned Shayden Morris there. Obviously,
Mhm.
there was talks of a £600,000 bid
Yeah.
being rejected plus add-ons. I think it was.
hmm
Is he one that you think is a must keep unless the offer is ridiculous?
Um, Again, this is something we debated last night, and I think if the offer becomes into seven figures, personally for me, I think he goes. It's hard to turn down seven figures for someone that is was really an impact sub. I think 600, I can understand why many fans believe it's derisory, and obviously given the impact he had last season, winning player of the year, obviously the goal involvement for the Scottish Cup final and general goal involvements he produced. But I think with a player that's out of contract next season, if you're given £1 million for someone that's only really making, 30, 20 minutes a game, bite your hand off.
Yeah.
That's where I stand on it.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. He definitely had these moments of impact, and Shaden Morris coming off the bench became a bit of a sort of thing last season. He'd come off and he would make an impact, but yeah, if someone's offering you seven figures for a guy who's got a year left, I
Exactly. And this time last season, people didn't even think he had a future at the club. So,
even I remember even early in the season, I think it was after the first game against St Johnston, I saw people on going, "Oh, Shaden Morris is like rank rotten, get him to," and all that kind of stuff. So, he did have a bit of a turnaround, and then it would be
hmm
some turnaround for the club if they managed to sell him for that fee.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just conscious of time a little bit. I don't think we're too bad, but I want to talk about obviously the season and that. But first, this for me is the big one. Former PSG wonder kid, Adil Aouchichi. Uh,
Yeah.
that see when I saw that, I was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
I had to double check that because he's had quite a high pedigree throughout his career.
hmm
Obviously, it's not gone the way that maybe he would have wanted and a lot of people expected. But
hmm
this seems like a really big signing.
It is obviously with the fact that we've got a fixed price option to buy come the end of the loan in there already. So, if he does have a stunning season, we've got ourselves a deal in place already. And, the Sunderland fan that we spoke to again when he signed said he is a player if we can get him playing. Again, Aberdeen fans have only been, benefit of 45 minutes, and there was glimpses there. I'm not going to get carried away because a plastic pitch I don't think maybe suited him necessarily. So again, I think he's going to be a player that might need time to grow in, but definitely excited. Obviously, as you said, that comes with a pedigree, and I know people have picked up on the fact PSG wonder kid, followed by Neymar, followed by Mbappe on Instagram. I think even that's just cool enough to think that those two players could be getting exposure to Scottish football.
Yeah, yeah, it's like those like linking videos you see, and it's like President Obama to I don't know, Graham Souness or something like that, and they
Yeah,
link all the way through. You know what I mean. So
yeah.
that that could be pretty cool. Now, sort of just moving on, I want to talk about Europe for a little bit.
hmm
Obviously, we've seen over the last few years how Europe can affect the clubs outside of Rangers and Celtic in terms of squad depth. European hangovers were very much a thing for Kilmarnock and Hearts last season, and
Yeah.
Kilmarnock only were in the qualifiers, and their hangover continued for a long, long time. So, is
Yeah.
that something that concerns you?
Um, I mean, initially it will have concerned me, but listening to Stephen Gunn's interview when the Dons were in Portugal for pre-seasons maybe alleviated some of that concern. Say, he highlighted the fact that they've taken learnings from 2 seasons ago under Barry Robson and how we suffered the same hangover that Hearts did, where we couldn't cope with the demands of Thursday to Sunday, and we're building a squad for that. Again, our debate last night was around Alfie Dorrington, what that means for Jack Milne's future. Off the back of having such a great game in the Scottish Cup final, does Alfie's return deny Jack a starting place? Well, the squad's got to be strengthened, it's got to have depth, it's got to have quality. You look at that left back, Gifami, that you've already spoken about, hasn't played, which has meant Graham Shinney's been starting there. Nicky Devlin's coming in at a left back to replace Graham Shinney during pre-season. That's two aging players. So Gifami being in there, you then have the experience. Deputising Jack Milne can also fill in at right wing back. You need to actually have players that can either suit the European football, suit the league football, or do a bit of both. I look at December in particular and I think straight away Aberdeen have got 10 games in December alone. There'll be two European games and all the league games that come. There's no chance Graham Shinney's playing 90 minutes of those 10 games. Possibly Nicky Devlin, possibly Nielsen as well. I know you don't want to speak too much about the signings, but I think the young Icelandic boy that we signed is going to be a real one to watch
Oh
based on what
yeah,
we've seen so
sorry,
far.
you said
Um,
Kjartansson, I think.
yeah, so, we have to have that strength and depth within the squad and, keeping that fight for places so that when we do change things, the quality of the squad isn't being affected and hopefully our results aren't being affected as well.
Yeah, and if you look at other clubs who are in maybe a similar position, obviously they don't have guaranteed group stage football. Dundee
Hmm.
United have basically signed a whole other starting 11. To obviously, I think they did lose a few players, but I think that they're still building. They're still trying to help strengthen the squad to deal with that. Is Do you think there's many more additions to come, or maybe just a couple?
I think we definitely need another striker. As I already touched on with Kusini's fitness concerns, I feel Esther Sokler carries the same fitness concerns. He's been a bit unlucky with injury during his time at Aberdeen. I'm not holding much hope out for Peter Ambrose. And then that leaves us with Fletcher Boyd, Pape Gay. Alfie Babbage hasn't seen much opportunity, and the word that I'm hearing is he's going to be going back out to Cali. So we'll see if that rings true or not. Um, so for me, striker is an immediate priority, and then it might be one or two last minute. I think certainly over in the next few weeks, it might be more focused on outgoings initially before we see any major more incomings.
Yeah. So I think we'll move on to domestic. First game of the league season. Not an easy one. Away from home, 8 o'clock on a Monday
Hmm.
to Hearts. Obviously, uh, coming up against an old manager as well. They're signing well, and I think even though it's the first game of the season, I think it would this could be a pivotal sort of game because when it comes down to the end of the season, I don't think there's going to be much between the likes of you guys, Hibs and Hearts.
Absolutely. Yet again, second season in a row, Monday night to start the season away from home in a ground that is impossible to get a ticket for an away fan like myself. So, a great start to the season. We'll be sitting at home watching on TV, but a great opportunity for the podcast because it means we can do live reactions and live build up to the game as well. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right calling it a pivotal game purely in the sense that after that we are then at home to Celtic. So it's almost pivotal to a competitor for third place or higher, but pivotal to put points on the board because if you don't and then fail to pick up points against Celtic, the following game it is a League Cup game, and then we've got Falkirk. So pressure quickly builds. Well, Falkirk at home, so yeah, it would be Falkirk because our Dundee United game's postponed now. So pressure to put points on the board quickly goes there, and I think Hearts are obviously building some confidence in the League Cup group stages. We haven't had that competitive fixture yet. But, as you've said, Hearts are building a squad. It could be that McInnes hasn't found his right squad yet. So, um, he'll be, I'm sure, looking to get one over on us. And it's never been a fixture that's kind to the away sides either, this one. But look, it's the opening day. Hopefully we can pick up 3 points and start the season well.
Yeah, definitely a tough start and a tough place to go, and then obviously take on the defending champions at your home patch. It's not a great start at all. But
No.
anyway, in terms of sort of the season expectations, I've kind of alluded to it. For me personally, I think it is a race for third between
Mhm.
Aberdeen, Hibs, and Hearts. Right now, I would say from sort of neutral point of view, I think Hibs look the best well placed out the
Mhm.
three. But is third place the expectation, or is it more of a hope for you this season?
I think third's always an expectation at Aberdeen. I think I understand why you use the word hope, given the fact that we'll be juggling European football with it and the demands and effects we've seen it have on other clubs. Um, it's important, now with the guaranteed group stage. Well, obviously, I don't know if this season comes with a guaranteed group stage, but to
Guaranteed league phase. Have I been saying group stage the whole time?
well, group league, same thing now that they've changed. I can never keep up with the changes of European football, but I think if this is the last season that comes with it, it's important to continue trying, utilize the finances. So we've seen, ourselves and Hearts yo-yo between that third place and neither be able to capitalize the season after. Probably agree with your comment to an extent on Hibs, mainly because I don't think they'll beat Midtjylland in Europe. And then I think they drop out of Europe if they don't win that. Um, so possibly them having a clean run at domestic football might help. Similar situation for Hearts. So I think the big thing for us is how we cope with that Thursday Sunday demand. Um, but if we can keep ourselves in that hunt for third up until Christmas, then we've seen what like in Scottish football anything can happen after January.
Yeah, obviously Hibs. There's a wee bit of recent history there as well. Obviously, with you guys winning the Scottish Cup and denying them guaranteed group stage or league phase, sorry, European football, and now and obviously the departing Jamie McGrath singing about them not making
Yeah.
it. You know. So maybe we could see a little mini rivalry there this season. What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely coming into a little rivalry between Aberdeen and both Edinburgh clubs. It can be a bit annoying on social media, I have to admit. But I think these sort of rivalries are good for Scottish football. It creates interest and it hopefully gets picked up by the TV companies, and it just shows that there's more to Scottish football than just two teams.
Yeah, definitely. And then I feel like if we get more of these teams competing, it'll be less of other people outside the Scottish game going, "What Rangers and Celtic play each other 4 times a season? What's going on here?" But I swear they
Mhm.
play every week. They'll be focusing on the other teams, the other rivalries, because it definitely does have more to offer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now we've kind of spoke about the league, kind of spoke about Europe. In terms of the cups, is there a part of you that's thinking we can go and do it again?
Yeah, why not? Let's make it a double this year. No, I think, look, the draw was extremely kind to us in the Scottish Cup. There's absolutely no denying that. In terms of us getting to Hampden, I mean, I could have left that and said the draw was extremely kind to us until we got to the final. But look, you can only play with what you're given, and we got to the final. Everybody wrote us off, pretty much bar myself, and we we did what many thought was impossible and lifted the Scottish Cup. The League Cup, we got to the semi-final. Jimmy Tulline, I don't know, let himself down is maybe a little bit harsh, but I think the fact that we got a 2-2 draw in October at Parkhead maybe played into his mindset that he could do it again at Hampden, and that backfired. So I think, cup runs are definitely an expectation again at Aberdeen, not a hope, to use a phrase that you said earlier. If we could retain the Scottish Cup, wow. I mean,
Yeah.
I've still not come down off of cloud nine from the 24th of May yet. So, um, But again, I think for the League Cup, it's an interesting one, given the fact that that's obviously played before Christmas and how we then cope again with our European involvement through that. But it always feels like when you're in Europe, obviously you avoid the hiccups of doing a Dundee and going out in the group stages, and potentially again a few easy draws away from a trip to Hampden, and anything can happen when you get to Hampden for a semi-final. So. I feel like the League Cup's a little bit of an easier one to win for Premiership sides. Um, and then, yeah, we'll wait and see for the Scottish Cup. That's a next year thought.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like you said though, the draw was kind to you up until the final, and you did the job on the day.
Hmm.
Obviously, it probably wasn't the most relaxed viewing for yourself. Yeah, yeah, it probably was one of the worst bits of foot. When you're in it, it's the worst thing you've ever watched. But after
Yeah.
you've done and you've won, it's one of the best days of your life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, right up until we scored, I was like, it's just going to be typical Aberdeen, so close, but yet so far. And then when you score, it was the longest 37 minutes up until penalties. And weirdly enough, there was a sort of feeling, a lot of people again pulling it back to the whole, year of the underdog, the year of the bird, and the fact that the last time we won the cup was against Celtic, penalties, and it felt like everything was in place. So as soon as Callum McGregor missed, I don't know why I suddenly felt like that at that moment was when I felt the most confident. And it still wasn't until I got home from Hampden and sat down and re-watched the penalties that I actually realised that the winning penalty had gone to a VAR check. I had absolutely no clue until midnight that night.
Wow. Yeah. And also, you mentioned there the year the underdog. We had a few. We had Spurs finally winning the
Yeah.
trophy. Crystal Palace won the FA Cup, and it seemed like it all fell into place for the Dons that day.
Hmm.
Just before we finish up, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. I would like a prediction for a league finish for Europe, whether you'll progress out of, whether you'll
Hmm.
make it to the Europa League or whether you'll go into the Conference League,
Yeah.
progress out of that league phase. And I would like a prediction for both cups.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll stick with what I said in 4-4-2 for the preview for the season, and I'll say fourth place for the league. I think we'll fall just short of third given the demands of Europe. Sticking with Europe, then I think we'll drop into the Conference League, but progress out of that league phase, and then probably gloriously fail at the first hurdle after that. But I think if we can get out of that league phase, it is an achievement in itself, but possibly should be an expectation having seen how Hearts coped last season. I think it's fair to say most people in Scottish football will have said Hearts should have got out of that
Yeah.
um, phase.
Yeah, they definitely should have. I think it was the draw to Petro Club, and Scottish football again falling
Yeah.
to hurdles that they shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, at home against, with the greatest respect to those minnows, they should have been getting the result and they didn't. But as you said, probably does sum up Scottish football on the big stage at times. Um, and then cups. This does feel like being put on the spot. I always say on the podcast, just get us to Hampden and I'll be happy. So semi-final appearances for both cups. And if we take one back, it'll be another good season.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
No, no problem. Always enjoyed the chat and it's been good crack. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you to everyone for watching and listening. If you've heard of us, I'm sure you've heard of Red Tinted Glasses. But if you haven't, make sure to go check them out. Go check out the Twitter at the Dugout 2024 and go check out the TikTok. Thank you and goodbye.